Good morning and welcome to another edition of the Daily Fix. I am your usual host and presenter, Advocate Tulo Hoyani. This morning I would just like to look at aspects of the evidence in the Meyiwa trial. Our starting point will be the confessions that Gininda, is so proud of, that Gininda has touted all over the place. A confession, like you probably know, is a statement made by an accused person before a magistrate. Before he's taken to that magistrate, he'll first of all perhaps, confer with the investigators. In this case, let us say it was Gininda and company. After he's indicated that he would like to make a confession, the accused person will then be taken before a magistrate. And before the magistrate records that confession, the magistrate must first of all ensure that this confession is made freely and voluntarily, and that there is no sort of pressure whatsoever on the person making the confession to make that confession. That is what the magistrate must establish. Having established that this person is willingly making this confession without any undue influence, the magistrate will then record that confession. And that confession will then be evidence before a court of law. In the case of Gininda, let us just look at what he says happened at the Basotho hostel. Gininda says at the Basotho hostel, money exchanged hands. Right? Money exchanged hands. He says, especially accused number 2. He says accused number 2, Bongani Ntanzi, then went on to implicate all the others as having committed the crime of killing Senzo Meyiwa. This is what he relies upon. Yet, interestingly, the accused persons have vehemently and strongly denied that they may ever made any confessions. Those confessions, therefore, cannot stand on their own because they are disputed confessions. In the first place, it is quite baffling why the judge accepted those confessions into evidence. Those confessions should have rightly been rejected. Because, let me put it this way, you go before a magistrate, confess to the killing of Senzo Meyiwa, and when you are tried for the same killing of Senzo Meyiwa, you are so adamant. You are so adamant. You should have read Ntenzi's face when he said he never made any confession. You then become so adamant that you have got nothing to do with that confession. Something is not right there. Why would you make a confession? Then when you come before a court of law and you're expected to confirm the contents of that confession, or at least to confirm that the confession is yours, you simply dispute it and rubbish it, because that is what the accused persons have done. Now, a confession, like I've indicated earlier on, does not stand on its own. Does not stand on its own. And the court has got to be very, very cautious when it deals with confessions. It has to be supported by some other evidence other than the confession itself. In other words, Justice Ratamokhate must say to himself, oh, well, here are the confessions which have been put before me, and these are disputed confessions. Is there any other evidence before me other than the confessions themselves, because they are disputed, which implicates these people in the commission of the crime with which they are charged with? In this case, the murder of Senzo Meyiwa. Where will he go? He'll go to the DNA evidence. DNA evidence is scientific evidence. It is scientific evidence that the courts will take recognition of and take into consideration and take very seriously. Now, the DNA evidence in this particular trial has excluded all the accused persons. So where do we go from here? You see, I've just said the confessions must be backed up by some other evidence other than the confessions themselves, especially in a case like this one where they are disputed. So there is no other evidence other than the confessions for the prosecution to rely upon. And let me go a step further and say this. Remember, there are two versions here we are dealing with. We are dealing with 375, that there were no intruders, which is a much more credible theory. Then we have this 636. Geninda and Balo is 636. You see, because 636 was a concocted version, clearly investigators involved in this matter have told me that there were no intruders into that house. So, in all likelihood, what happened was these poor people were arrested, tortured, in all sorts of in all sorts of ways, right? Like sleep deprivation and so on and so forth. And even if they did make those confessions were not made freely and voluntarily. They were made under duress, right? Like they are alleging that the confessions they never made confessions. At least the free and voluntarily made confessions are not before this court. So there we are. There is no evidence on which this court can convict, even according to their own narrative of 636. And I've already said in the last video that, 636 is a discredited version because they've even discredited themselves by not arresting Kelly Khumalo. But even by their own narrative, with the evidence that they've put before this court, there is no evidence on which to convict. There is just no evidence on which to convict. Because if the judge is going to rely on the confessions, on the disputed confessions, which are unsupported by any other evidence, especially the DNA evidence, like I've just indicated a short while ago, that would be a travesty of justice. That would certainly be an appealable issue. So even on their own narrative. And we still have to see the real killers of Senator Meyiwa, remember, in court. These are not the real killers of Senator Meyiwa. I've always maintained. So there you have it. He might convict them because my gut feeling is he's going to convict. So what if he convicts? If he convicts, there's an appeal. I've talked about Section 317 that can be taken up now to bring up the irregularities that we have seen in this trial ever since it started. But there's also an appeal process. And at the appeal stage, I think whoever goes on appeal with this matter will have to be alive to these issues. Because the only chance these people have is on appeal. The way this trial is being conducted, who can ever doubt that these poor people are going to get convicted? There can be no doubt. I mean, you can see the demeanor of Baloyi. Baloyi is enjoying himself there. You can see how the judge always, leans in favor of the prosecution. And there is no doubt the conviction is on the way. In spite of the weight of evidence before the court. But let us, say, okay, let us not prejudge what the judgment will be, what the verdict will be. But I'm only saying in the event, because the chances are a conviction is coming, there can always be an appeal. So ponder those things. There's no evidence, even in terms of their own 636. 636 was just a concocted version. Right? It was just a concocted version. Now those confessions had to be procured by Geninda and Company to suit the narrative of 636. And this is what they put before the court. And the real evidence is out there in 375, crying out for attention. And one day, the killer of Senzo Meyiwa will be in that dock answering for that crime. Having said that, let me thank you very much for the subscriptions that I'm seeing. Let me thank you very much for the views that I'm seeing. I'm highly encouraged by what I'm seeing around me. I really value your support. I've also said I'm offering a free legal advice service. In other words, I give you advice, right? I give you advice free of charge, right? A lot of you have been asking me on their comments and so on, do you deal with road accident fund matters? I deal with a lot of road accident fund matters. Please come forward and you'll get a professional service and you'll get professional advice about how you can go about with those RAF claims. Having said that, please keep on watching, please keep on subscribing, and have a wonderful day.